Well, Hudson, it is nice that we've been able to connect. It's interesting that we're talking about how to solve problems, and both you and I just spent the last 15 minutes trying to figure out how we could even run this Zoom show. So if we can do it, anyone can be successful, huh? Is that a fair statement to say?
If I can learn how to use technology, anybody can.
There you go. Well, we have known each other for some length of time. We met through the real estate business. If you could, for our audience, share with them kind of your general background, the steps that you've gone through to get to where you are today. And then we're going to talk about how you can face the turmoil and troubles in today's world and find opportunities. How's that sound?
Absolutely. Well, my name's Hudson Henley. I was born in the mid 60s. I went to law school, graduated from the University of Texas with honors in 1991, and embarked on a legal career, started practicing law. And in the midst of my law practice, I began to invest in real estate. I always tell people that I kind of fell into real estate by accident. I had a friend who came to my house once, and this was in the mid 90s. And he said, "Hey, Hudson, how would you like to buy my house?" And I said, "Well, I already have a house. You're standing in it." He said, "Well, no, you could take over the payments, lease it out, and just give me a little bit of money." And I did. And then the dot-com crash came a few years later, and I realized that one nice thing about real estate is I really know what the books are. I know whether people are paying me, whether they're not. I know how much the carry cost is. It's very manageable. It's simply elegant. And I thought at the time, well, if I had 10 of these, and that was well over 1,000 properties, 2,000 properties since. And I just kept buying bigger, and I got to where I developed proficiency in rehabbing apartment complexes and repurposing them and selling them. And that's my primary business, although I still own quite a few single family homes, 80 something of them now. They're all rented. I seldom sell the single family homes. I do sell the apartments from time to time, do 1031 exchanges, buy bigger. But that kind of sums up how I got into it and what I do.
So as you look at this years of experience that has brought you to where you are today, and you covered a period of time where there's been certainly some tumultuous times here in the United States in the real estate business, in the finance business. I think today we see something where systems are coming to a point where they can't survive any longer. So we've got 80 or 100 years of our current financial structure. We've now borrowed at the sovereign level well over what we can generate in income on an annual basis. We're raising interest rates up so that just the debt cost on what we're having is already prohibitive. And so people are scared. I mean, I'm seeing people that their grocery bills and gas bills have gone up way beyond what the raises they've got, and they're getting poorer and poorer. I just came back from San Diego, and in the middle of downtown, there's pup tents up and down the sidewalks in the middle of downtown, people living in them. And that's just become a norm. And from what I hear, it's like that all over California. I'm starting to see that around Dallas now. So certainly these are times that are causing people stress. How do you see what someone can do instead of be frightened to say, okay, I see there's problems, but where do I go from here?
Well, is the glass half empty or half full? And I tend to think it's half full. I think there's tremendous opportunity right now. One of the things that happened is when the rates went up, and everybody knows they did, cap rates also went up. And so, now we're buying property for far less than we could have bought it for a year ago, same properties, pound for pound. And, the rates are higher. But I anticipate that at some point we're going to have a repositioning of the rates. And I think the opportunity is going to be tremendous to refinance. The cap rate should go back down, perhaps sell. And, I could be wrong, but I've seen turmoil before. And usually there's opportunity in turmoil. And I think there is right now.
So for our audience, some of which might not be familiar with real estate, can you give them a real simplistic idea of what a cap rate is, how it's arriven at?
Sure. It's essentially an attempt to assign a numerical value to sort of like a price to earnings ratio with stocks. That is it's an attempt to discern what the relative value is, so that you can price things across product types. You can compare similar products. And try to determine whether indeed it's a good buy. And it's only a marker. It's not something that has any sort of exactitude. I mean, to me, the big challenge is looking at a property and deciding whether there's opportunity, whether there's an opportunity to raise rents, to improve collections. There are a lot of things that I do to do that. I mean, number one, it starts with the people. But I think just one of the things I say about cap rates in general is you can get carried away with the idea of price to relative return.
So let me ask you this, because at the beginning of this explanation, you said you see the glass half full. So
Yep.
what I'm hearing is a philosophy of how you view life, which I believe has everything to do with the reality that you create. How have you learned to do that? Have you refined a practice? Have you found that you did something before that wasn't so useful and you got to this? I'm sure our audience would like to know, oh, half full, that's a positive attitude. How can you have that when things are going wrong around you?
Well, I take solace in the fact that whatever I'm experiencing, other operators are too. We are actually leasing very strongly right now, right this minute. And as long as the money's coming in, things will work themselves out. I enter properties with cash on hand so that I'm not in a position where if an air conditioner goes out, that it's a disaster. We're ready for it, and as long as the rents are coming in and we're increasing them, I think things are going to improve. And I also kind of think of that analogy with that old joke with the bear, that I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun you. I feel the same way about real estate. If things get really, really bad, everybody's in trouble, and the stronger operators are going to survive. So I don't worry about it nearly as much as a lot of people do, I'm sure.
So it sounds to me like you have planned over the
Yeah.
course of your life, so you don't put yourself on the razor's edge where any small adjustment is going to whack you off at the knees. You got a little bit of breathing room, which then gives you the confidence. Okay, this happened. I knew something would happen. Fortunately for me, I can get through that onto the next piece. Is that how you built your real estate business over the years? You've been 30 years in it now, maybe, real estate business? Something
Wow.
like
Well, nearly.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wish I could go back in time to say 2010, when people were still frightened. Prices have been marked down, relative to where pricing was 5 years after that. As you well know, they were virtually giving away property. And I did buy a lot between 2010 and 2013. And I wish I would have bought more. And
you and I associated in the short sale business when there was a
yeah.
lot of that around, when the values of property had dropped significantly. And did you also notice that the drops in value were in some of the less desirable areas? You get areas like Plano, which is a suburb here in Dallas that's been very well planned. And what happened with Plano, I owned out there, prices just stopped appreciating for a while, but they didn't drop 40% like they did down south, or 50%.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. But, on the other hand, I'm a big proponent of North Oak Cliff. I own quite a bit of real estate over there. including most all of the land across the street from the coming deck park, both phase one and phase two. I have invested very heavily in Oak Cliff, big believer in it because it's a transitional neighborhood. And if you look at the price increases in Oak Cliff as an example, look, compare those over the last 5 years versus the Park Cities and Plano and a lot of other places. You're going to be surprised if you've never looked.
So let me ask you this about buying in upcoming areas, because I saw that happen down in Bishop Arts. And
Right.
the early arrivers in Bishop Arts waited 20 years for the market to actually catch up to where it finally got. How did you pick North Oak Cliff? And how did you see that this area will transition instead of stay blighted like some places in Detroit are still, in Chicago are still blighted 50 years later?
Right. Well, I have to say that I cut my teeth in Old East Dallas. And, the first home I ever owned was on Monticello and the M Streets. And I started buying property near my house. And as you probably know, it became more and more gentrified further south and, closer to Ross Avenue. And, I've sold a lot of the property, some of which I wish I would have held on to a little bit longer, but
Yeah.
I've done extremely well in Old East Dallas. And a friend of mine moved out to North Oak Cliff, and I grew up in Garland, so I'm from the DFW Metroplex, and I always thought of Oak Cliff as kind of a blighted older area. And a friend of mine moved out there, and when he moved, I was kind of surprised. He was a suburban kid, and he said, "No, you should come check it out." When I did, what I saw many years ago was the same sort of trajectory that I'd seen with Old East Dallas. That is, that you could see block by block people buying houses, knocking them down, rehabbing them, making them better, doing the same thing with the apartment complexes and strip malls. And you could just see a wave heading south, further and further south. So, having gone through the same thing in Old East Dallas, I thought this is the same movie. And it turned out to be correct.
So what you're saying is that history does repeat itself. And if you recognize similar patterns and understand what's driving them, then it's easier to predict the future. Now, here's what's maybe not as easy to predict. How can you determine, or how did you guess what the time lag would be from the time that you said, okay, I see what's happening here, I think I'm going to do something here, to when it actually happened? And were you accurate, or were you off by some large number of years?
Well, it's hard to see the future, and I'm not claiming I can,
Right.
but you could see the block by block transition. You continue to see it, and you have catalysts like the Bishop Arts District and then the Deck Park that's coming, and I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that when a beautiful new multi-million-dollar park comes in, as with the Clyde Warren Park that splits uptown and downtown, that people are going to want to live by it. They're going to want to be able to walk their dog there, socialize, do all the things that they do at the other park that's already in existence.
So do you think there was a drive out to the suburbs to escape the deterioration of the inner city areas, the closer to downtown, but then eventually people got tired of having to drive all the way from north to get south down to where they work and wanted to be closer to where they work? Or was it something else?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. First of all, one of the things I've come to believe about real estate, something I preach to the people who work for me, is don't superimpose your values on everybody else. What you want, where you think is desirable, might not be where somebody else finds desirable. I live in Preston Hollow. I enjoy it, like it quite a bit. I have friends who live in West Plano. I have friends who live in the Park Cities. I have friends all over the place. And, Rockwall. And the Rockwall people love the lake and wouldn't want to live anywhere else. So, you have to be careful about deciding, well, I wouldn't want to live there. Well, look how many people live in these particular places. Lots of people live in Rockwall and love it. Lots of people live in West Plano and love it. People tend to flock to where they find it, whether it's safety they're most concerned about, or whether it's public schools or private schools, or access to the arts district. Different strokes for different folks. And as to Oak Cliff, all you have to do is go out there to Bishop Arts on a Friday night and see how jam-packed the streets are. The valets are busy. Every restaurant is full.
Do you think it's that urban cultural feeling that feels so alive, a little bit raw, but the edges have been taken off so you feel safe, even though it is vibrant?
Yeah, and it's certainly a phenomenon for people a little bit younger than me.
Yeah.
I'm usually in bed by 11 o'clock on a Friday night, so I'm not exactly a party hound. But for the young, good-looking crowd, Bishop Arts is definitely one of the hot spots.
So what you've described in the bigger picture is the willingness to see the world from other people's values and points of view. I heard you say that, and that's really, I'm going to believe, one of the key things that allowed you to have the success you've had in real estate. For example, if you're looking for tenants that they're still good pay, but they're working class, you have to be able to understand what's important to them, what they're willing to pay for, what they can afford to pay for, and give them those things in a building at a price that works.
That's absolutely correct. And when I go on tours to look at apartment complexes, I don't see it as a mathematical problem. That is, we just talked about cap rates. I don't see it as something that's easily converted to numbers. My training is in law. I didn't get an MBA. I don't have an MBA in finance. What finance I know, I'm self-taught, and I was a business minor. But when I go out to a property and I'm considering buying it, especially larger ones, multifamily, I'm looking at who lives there now and who could live there. And it's all about the people. It's about the people you employ. It's about the people you lease to. And one of the things that I think is a truism is, if people are 30 years old and they're still not paying their bills, they're going to continue to not pay their bills. And if you're going to succeed with apartment complexes, then you need to figure out who's going to pay and who's not. You need to provide a good service, better service than the rest. And you need to try to disassociate yourself with tenants who aren't going to pay you. And if you do that, if you make that the focus, then you'll see that your collections go up, and so does the value of the property. And sometimes the only way to get there is to suffer some short-term pain by, going through, culling through the tenants and figuring out who's a good fit and who's not. Just like with the job application, that is, you don't take the first person who comes along. You don't keep tenants just because they've been there before. And I've had a lot of success just turning over the population. One of the things that you mentioned, working class, I do a lot of, class C, class B kind of apartments. And I think it's a big mistake to assume that all people who are wage earners are all the same. They're not. There are people who get up every morning, show up, make good employees. Good employees make good tenants.
So it sounds in your selection criteria that you would even be able to accept someone that maybe did have some financial problems, but you look at their character and you say, I see there was an aberration that took place in their life here. They had some difficulty, maybe even paid their rent late, maybe even had a foreclosure because of some crisis. But you see in the overall picture of this person, okay, that was an event. That's not their character. I can see in their character, they'd be someone I'd be interested in having as an employee or a tenant.
Boy, um, I yes, yes, there are people who suffer pitfalls and turn their lives around and so forth, but you only can know so much about a person
Hmm.
in an interview, and of course, I'm not interviewing these people. I have to entrust people to do it. I have too big an organization for me to meet with the tenants, so you have to go with objective criteria.
Hmm.
And as I said a little earlier, I'm a big believer in good employees make good tenants, because if somebody goes to work for you and you allow them to stay there for 2 years and continue to pay them and perhaps give them wage increases, it's because the person's performing. If the person doesn't show up to work on Mondays and has, sudden illnesses, I mean, we've all had employees like that.
Sure.
Those are also the people who tend to be in and out of jobs and tend not to take their lives seriously and tend to let their kids run crazy in the complex and cause trouble. I find that the people who get up, go to work, and keep jobs for long periods of time. I mean, obviously, we've all switched jobs before,
Right.
but uh, you know, they have consistent job history. That is, to me, one of the very most important things. Now, we do have people who get subsidized housing, Section 8 even, and we will take those in some instances for sure. Um, you just have to know how to manage Section 8 tenants because they are a little different. They don't go to work every day. You do get paid, but you have to be careful about just leasing to just anybody with a voucher.
Hmm. So in what I hear you saying about the character of the tenant, which ties directly to the character of the employee.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to build a good asset, you
Mm-hmm.
said over and over again, the asset's the people. There happens to be some concrete and bricks, but you put the wrong people in there and it's going to deteriorate.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And, one of the things that I see pretty universally is that the people who don't pay you are also bad tenants in other regards too. And there are exceptions. I mean, people really do have medical issues and so forth. I mean, I'm not saying everybody, but for the most part, if they're not paying you, they're probably not good to have around either.
So we're talking back issues of character. So it sounds what you have done is you might acquire a building where
Mm-hmm.
the tenants that are occupying the building have been allowed to be there with behaviors that aren't conducive to a good community.
Right.
And as you take over, you have to realize if you get whatever section of your building out with those, there'll be a period of time where there'll be units vacant. You need to spend money
Right.
to fix them up. If you don't fix them up, you're going to get more people are willing to accept low quality are usually people with less choices, right? So you have to raise it up. And so as you raise the building up, you increase the quality of tenant that's there. You've already got the good employees that you turn rough decisions quickly when you possibly can. Over what period of time, if you take an asset that's really troubled, a building, have you found it takes to really convert that into something that's solid, where the people that live there like one another, feel safe, then the whole thing is a cohesive, healthy economic and personal environment?
Well, I just completed that process from start to finish just last year.
Ah,
Uh, so one of the assets that I no longer have, uh, I purchased it in January 2019, and it was a very distressed asset. And it took about 2 years to get it to pretty normal. And then we continued to fine tune it. And the exit was double what we paid, 264 unit asset. But as a case in point, um, you can't take cookie cutter approach to these things. um, you know, yes, it's true that people like natural stone countertops. Yes, they like parking lots that don't have potholes. Obviously, they like nice greenery and trees and bushes and everything else. But as a preliminary matter, they're not going to live in a complex where they don't feel safe.
Right.
And so, with this particular asset that we've since disposed of, there was multi-generational drug selling going on at the adjoining properties. And I spent roughly $500,000 on security and off-duty police over the course of 3 years to get the criminals off the adjoining property, which sounds kind of paradoxical because, yes, I was spending money to patrol somebody else's property. But the idea was that decent people, the kind of people you want to lease to, are not going to want to drive past a bunch of guys selling dope in a parking lot.
Right.
And so we ran them off, and I've been by there since, and they seem to still be gone, which is good. So
So
we improved.
you actually raise the environment of the entire community, which then directly affected the value of your property because it became a desirable place to live.
That's exactly right. And there's certainly a good feeling that comes from something like that to improve people's lives. But yeah, there was an economic purpose behind it, and it served us well.
So it sounds like you're saying if you do good things for the overall health of an area, the people, that there's an economic reward that indirectly or directly comes from doing the right thing.
There certainly can be, and
Yeah.
there certainly was in that instance. But again, it goes to the idea of putting yourself in their shoes. They may not have the income to live in Plano, but they want the best they can for their family, and so they're not going to want their children to be anywhere near a criminal environment that's dangerous, where they could be exposed to drugs and violence and everything else, theft.
So with all the properties that you have owned, and this one you owned for a couple years, 3 years maybe, how do you say, okay, I've done what I can, I've maximized this, it's time to sell? Is it different for each property? Does someone come up and just offer you a price where you say, well, for that I'll have to take it and put my money into working someplace else? How do you make that decision?
Well, I seldom will sell a larger asset unsolicited. I get approached by brokers all the time. Would you consider a cash offer? Would you consider this, that? But typically, if you're talking about a multi-million-dollar asset, there's a right way to market it. You put it on the market with people who know the market, who are good at what they do, and give it time to season, be shown. You prepare it for the sale, and then you exercise patience and wait for the best offer to come in, which is not necessarily the highest dollar amount. It's the quality of the buyer. It's the quality of the offer, the terms, and certainly, if it's a larger asset, I want non-refundable money. But there are things that you do to assure that you get the best performance. But as to your question of how do you decide, I did sense that the market was a little too hot. And so that's one of the reasons why I put it on the market. But, one of the things that's often asked is, well, if it's such a good deal, why hasn't somebody else bought it? Or if it's such a good deal, why is he selling it? And I used to ask those questions. There's that kind of nagging sensation of, why do they want to sell it? Well, because if you do what I do, um, you know, I can certainly sit on something for 20 years and pay off the debt and have it free and clear. But that's not the business I'm in. I'm in the business of using other people's money, leverage with lenders. And so if I buy something like the case I mentioned a little earlier for 15 million, can sell it for 30, which I did, I unlocked a whole lot of equity that could be used somewhere else. I sold another asset, did quite well with it, a 185 unit asset that I paid 14,375,000 and sold it for 24.6 in a very similar time frame, closed a few months after the first one. And in both cases, it felt like a good time to get out. And there was a whole lot of equity to unlock, and I've redeployed the equity. So if other people are going through the same thought processes, so the idea that there aren't any good deals out there just isn't the case. And I don't think that you have to knock on every door, look at 1,000 properties in order to buy one to get a good deal.
Have you found that because you've been around for a bit, you have a reputation as someone that performs, that deals come to you, and so your time of digging through the street to find an opportunity is probably behind you? You have plenty of opportunities that come to you, and then you decide which of those are worth considering, and then of those you consider, which are the best use of your time and your dollars.
Absolutely. I've been a buyer and a seller, and I know what it feels like to be a seller. And I know the thought processes I have when I sell, and I know what the conversations are like when I talk to the broker who lists for me. I want to know, I want to know a lot about the people to whom I'm attempting to sell a multi-million-dollar asset. I want to make sure that they have the ability to do what they say they're going to do. And that's, you start there. You don't take the first offer. And so when I throw my hat in the ring and I'm attempting to buy something, I pride myself on the fact that I believe that the people I'm dealing with know that I'm for real, that I do what I say I'm going to do, that I'm honest, that I'm not going to try to retrade it. And well,
so obviously at one time you didn't know what you know now. If someone wanted to get into multifamily, would you recommend that they start maybe with single family duplexes and then build up to multifamily? Would you recommend they partner with somebody who knows what they're doing? What do you think is a wise path?
well, I suppose it depends on the age group of the person. I spend a lot of time on an annual basis mentoring people. I have friends who will recommend that their sons come and talk to me and come visit in my office or whatever. And one of the first things I ask people who are younger, in their 20s, early 30s, do you own your own home? And a lot of the times they'll say, well, no, I don't. And I'll say, well, you realize you'll never get a better loan, as you well know, David.
Yeah.
You'll never get a better loan than an owner-occupied loan on your own house. Nobody's going to lend you money with 5% down to buy a multifamily property. No single lender. But a house, you could do that. You can get an excellent interest rate, even if you've never owned real estate before. And so I'll meet people sometimes and I'll ask that very question, do you own your own home? And it's surprising how often they'll say, well, no, I don't. Can't really afford anything around here. And, I'm talking to you from my office here in Uptown. My brother and I own this building over here.
Yeah.
And, they'll say, well, I live near here and rents are, property prices are really high. And so my response to that is, well, do you have to live in Uptown? Do you have to live where you do? Well, this is where I like, my friends are nearby and everything. And, to that, I would say life is about sacrifice. If you want to get ahead, you have to sacrifice something. And so if it means moving to a smaller home in the suburbs, buying a little duplex, renting out half of it, doing something like that creative. Maybe it's not the neighborhood you want to live in, but it's a start. You get that house and you pay the bills and you let it appreciate a bit, save some more money. And then you're in a position to buy a nicer house, the house of your dreams later. But for now, instead of paying the landlord, you're paying your own mortgage and you're creating equity. So for a lot of people, I say start there. It depends on the circumstances. If you already have a house, it depends on how much time you have to devote to real estate. If you're a medical doctor and you're really busy and you've got a couple of kids and a lot of things going on, it might be hard to manage a multifamily property. Now, there are third-party property management companies that you can turn things over to. You can buy a property and not do much of anything, and other people will do it for you, but you're going to pay for it.
Right.
And you won't necessarily have the expertise the first time you do it. You might not be so good at it. A lot of the things that I do, I learned the hard way.
Mm-hmm. You have your own property management company, or you have people that you've associated with over years, you turn it over to them, or both, combination?
No, I run my own, and these people work for me. And one of the obviously Dallas is a great place to invest. DFW is on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And once the economic doldrums pass, we're going to see this place go on fire again. Feel very confident about that. But in addition to the fact that I like Dallas for those reasons, I also like to be able to go look at it. I spend a lot of time personally on property. And if you ask my property managers, they'll tell you that I'm prone to just showing up and unannounced. I just want to go look. I want to see if there's litter on the grounds. I want to see if there are people loitering around who, don't belong. I want to see if things are working. I want to visit with the staff. I want to listen to them talk to people, interact with people. It's a people business. It is a service. And you want people who are friendly, happy, nice to people. You want a friendly environment, and you want to provide a good service.
What I'd like to say is I've talked to a lot of people over many, many years about real estate. You and I met in real estate. I've been around it for decades.
Yep.
I think that you are the first person I can remember that said it's the people. It's not a cap rate. It's not whether you can buy it 30% below appraised value. All of those things come in. Yes. But you keep coming back. It's the people. If you understand people live here, people work here, you put the right people there, and then accidentally you end up with a valuable asset. But it's the people that make it valuable. Not an empty building isn't valuable.
Right.
Except for the cost of the bricks, I guess.
That's exactly right. I mean, you think about it, whatever level you're renting at, whether it's an apartment in the Park Cities or a house in Pleasant Grove. I mean, whatever it is that you're renting at, whatever level, you want value. We try not to move anybody in who doesn't make 2.5 times rent, right? People use gauges like that. I mean, it's subject to certain nuance, but generally speaking, people are going to get the most they can afford to get, right? Mm-hmm. Generally speaking. So if they have a $1,500 budget, they want to get what they consider to be the best buy for $1,500, which is going to be, it's going to be a personal thing. Some people want a swimming pool, but whatever it is that they decide is good value for that $1,500 budget that they have, that's what they're going to pick. It's not a math problem for them. And so what you have to attempt to do is provide good good value for that 1,500 or 2,000 or 3,000, whatever your rent level is.
So you must keep track of what buildings in your general area, since you're generally competing geographically with those that would want to live near whatever location it is. Do you notice that maybe someone's putting in upgrades in their building? It's time for you to do it, or is not that simple?
Well, you know, well, first of all, I love to see my neighbors improving. I've never thought of them as competitors. I think of them more as associates. I would much rather that my neighbors, whoever they might be, keep up their properties, rent them for good money, rent them to the right people, because that means the neighborhood's coming up, and that means my property is more desirable. But yes, we're going to see what it is that others are offering, and you know, I'm a big believer in Adam Smith's invisible hand, and that, you know, if you price it right, it'll lease. It just magically happens. If you price it wrong, it won't lease.
Yeah, over or underprice is just as easy a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, you look at what you rented for before, and you look at comps in the neighborhood, you might price it a little bit above that and see what happens. If the phone doesn't ring, you're probably too high.
It's no matter how smart you are, really the ultimate decider is the marketplace. It's smarter than all of us.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. But what you have control over is who's there. And if you start getting into multifamily, you got 200 or 300 units in a complex, you have to be very cognizant of what it would be like to live there. And that tenant who's paying rent solidly, but has a dog who's pooping on the balcony, or plays music loud or anything else, is a detriment. And the fact that he's paying good rent isn't good enough reason to renew him if he's a detriment to the property. And sometimes making decisions about who to renew or who to lease to hurts in the short term. But I'm a long player. I'm not looking at, you know, this month's collections, except that I want this month's collections to be better than last month's, and I want to continue that process until we get to a situation where we've got stable rents and good solid tenants who are paying solid money. And
So
that's where
what I hear you saying is that probably one of the greatest risks in the real estate business is short-term thinking, because you can usually engineer or weasel a way into something, right? But you're thinking short-term.
No doubt. You know, every time I take over a property, if I retain staff, I retrain them. And I want to train them myself, because a lot of the habits that they get are not good ones. The use of subcontractors, for instance, that they have their favorite people. Perhaps they give them birthday cards and bring lunch to them and everything else, and that's why they get the work. But they charge too much. Mm-hmm. They're subbing things out that should be done in house. You don't have somebody on staff who can charge up a air conditioner condenser. You've got to have that kind of stuff, and it's amazing to me how often I see that they don't, and I see that they quote make deals with tenants. For me, I don't mean to sound punitive or hard or anything, but if you want to know what the deal is, read the lease. The rent's due on the 3rd, and if you don't pay by the 3rd, then we're going to have a problem. I don't mean to be difficult, but you don't go into a restaurant, order a steak dinner, and say, "Well, hey, I forgot my wallet. I can't pay you. I'll be back on Monday."
Yeah, I'm a little short. I see this is 25, but I tell you what, I'll give you 15, and that includes the tip, or I'm walking. Right.
Exactly. And you do that in a restaurant, they're going to say, "Well, I'll tell you what, sir, you do that, we're going to call 911." And I think that the short-term thinking is, let's work with the tenants. Well, what happens when you quote work with the tenants, end quote, is that you're going to have a lot of work to do, because no matter what you tell them, hey, I like you, David. So if you'll just keep it to yourself, sure, I'll work something out with you. You give me that $100 today, and I'll just wait for you to get paid on the 15th, and you could give me another 500. Then the minute that you tell them, hey, don't tell anybody else, they're out the door and they're bragging about having done it.
Of course. Yeah, it spreads to the whole building.
That's right.
And
That's
then
right.
people that are capable of paying start thinking, well, I'd rather go to dinner, maybe get a new thing for my car. They'll take my money late. So, and it deteriorates. It just becomes a monster.
You create a culture, you create it among people who wouldn't have otherwise done it. But what you find, though, is when you work deals, which a lot of them do. And I've had this discussion with new staff many times. Well, at the old place, we did this and we had a lot of success. Yeah, but you find that you're making a lot of deals because you're perpetuating the problem by keeping those people who seek the deals on your property. And it's a ticking time bomb. Eventually it's going to blow and you're not going to get paid and you're going to get left hanging. So rip the bandage off and move on.
Make it simple. Here's the rules. We gave you a fair price for the features you've got. You want us to keep the building up. We expect you to keep up your end. It's a fair deal. It's not punitive.
Right. Yeah. It's just business.
As you look forward to this year, my gosh, we're already through a quarter, right? As you look forward to the rest of this year, what would you say, even beyond real estate, where should people be mentally to navigate through what could be frightening times, see that this is a transition of things, whatever comes out the other end is going to come out, but so they themselves, their family and their friends can navigate these times and not only tolerate it, but find blessings in it and stay on top of their game?
Well, we haven't had a Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns. We haven't seen Washington Mutual get subsumed by a bigger bank. None of that's happened. So far, Silicon Valley Bank, which most of us had never even heard of, cratered. And then when you dig in and when you listen to the commentary about it, it wasn't the kind of bank that you and I deal with. They weren't lending money on apartment complexes and medical facilities and homes and ordinary stuff like that. They were lending money to IPOs. Very different. And so I see that as a very isolated example. Certainly some of the regional banks got in a little trouble with purchasing bonds, fixed rate, and having to sell them off to create liquidity. But for the most part, the ordinary regional banks, I talk to bankers all the time. And my banker friends are very confident right now. They don't see that the sky is falling. It certainly doesn't feel anything like it did in 2007, 2008. That was scary.
Yeah, we'd come through a bubble that was beyond. If you want to simplify it to the subprime debacle, where all of a sudden overnight you took 40% of the borrowers out of the market without a change in supply, that's going to have a short-term effect on values, right?
Right. And looking back to that, I think one of the more interesting things is that we didn't suffer Great Depression era unemployment, right? And so the thesis that, well, people, if they lose their jobs, will default, but they won't otherwise, that proved to be false. What proved to be true is that even people who can afford to pay won't pay, or not all of them, but a lot of people will not pay if they don't think what they're paying for is worth it, no matter what they signed. So if they borrowed $400,000 on a house that's now worth 2.25, and they're seeing for sale signs go up in the neighborhood and foreclosures and short sales, then a lot of people will say, why should I pay for this? I'm upside down. I'm way upside down. And what we witnessed is people with regular jobs, salary jobs, not commissions, people who worked for the government, with steady incomes, defaulted, even though they had the money. And so I think right now you look at what we're facing here, we're going to have a housing shortage in DFW. I'm confident of it because people are not, the houses are not cratering despite the rate increases. Pricing has gone down. I'm sure you'd agree with that,
Yeah,
right?
here's what I noticed. I have my clients asking me, I still have a real estate business, and they'll say, well, what's happening to real estate? And I'll say, well, maybe a year ago, we would have had 20 offers and 5 of them would have been significantly over list price. Now, maybe we have 1 or 2 offers at, or maybe slightly below list price. But how many offers can you accept? 1.
Exactly.
Right. And the below list price, that's an arbitrary number because the price they were asking was probably unrealistic anyway. Right. So, and they still did well. If they owned the property for 2 years, they did well, much less if they had it for 10 or something.
No doubt about it. And even if rates stayed as elevated as they are right now, eventually we hit equilibrium because, what motivates people to buy a different house in the first place? Wherever your neighborhood is, you think, well, I wish I could be on the other side of the river, or I wish I could be closer to this or that, or, we need more space. We have an extra kid. Those are the things that compel people to buy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so at some point, we hit equilibrium, home prices start going up again, you're creating equity. And sure, you might have a 4.25% interest rate on your current home, but it doesn't work for your purposes. And you see that you can afford the bigger house with this rate that's the new normal. And eventually that's what you aspire to. Because,
and of course, there's always refinances, right? Because we've gone so vertical on rates, regardless of where they end up coming down a year, 2 years from now, probably lower than where they are at this minute. You could refinance.
Right. And as John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. So, life goes on. Your kids are going to a new school and things are happening. And so at some point you just say, can we afford this? Can we afford this new house? And if the answer is yes, they're going to start making moves on it.
So you just came back again to people.
Right.
Instead of thinking, what's the difference between 4 and 7? You could think about that all day long. So now that they're at 7, I guess I'll never buy another house the rest of my life until they get back to 4, or that becomes really unimportant when you really look. Here's this house. Here's what it costs at current rates. I can afford that. I'm going to buy it.
Right. I mean, for many years, people have moved into neighborhoods like the M Streets where I once lived, with the idea that we're going to save and save. And eventually we want a home in the Park Cities because we want our kids in these great Park City schools, and they are great.
Yeah.
And so what are you going to defer that and just say, well, we can't ever realize our dream because rates are at 7 and not 4. If you think they're going to stay at 7 forever, then forever you'll stay in the house you're in.
Right. So I can tell why you've been successful. I had a suspicion. I've been around you for many, many years. And what I've noticed about you, as you elevated yourself financially, you're still the same guy. You still take your time to talk to ordinary people who have dreams and aspirations. You'll be kind to them, but you'll ask them that question. Okay, Mr. Johnson, you'd like to own 1,000 doors. Do you own your own house? No. Okay, well, why don't you start with 1 door and then you can elevate to the 1,000 later down.
Right.
And it's a people business. I really love that. I think if if our listeners could hear one thing today, because everything is a people business. We took it in real estate because that's what you and I have been around for so many years, but everything's a people business. The reason you were willing to come and talk on our show today is because you and I knew one another and you thought, oh, this would be kind of fun. We
Yeah.
didn't think, well, let's see, what's the economics of what's the cap rate of our relationship? What can we get out of this on the open market? No, it was like this would be an interesting use of time. Let's see what we can do. Maybe we share some ideas with our audience. That's a plus for them. And I would like to say this. Thank you so much for your time today. You've been so generous with it. I would like to encourage our listeners to give us a thumbs up, to subscribe. If you got any questions that you'd like to ask me or Hudson, please go ahead and reach out to us. Hudson, do you mind if they reach out to you? You can give them a contact someplace if you like.
Yeah, they can contact me at HHenley@HudsonHenleyProperties.com.
There you go. Hudson is a great friend, a great humanitarian. He's got a good eye for business. I think what he's done in what we might call working class neighborhoods has really been a credit to himself, to his group, and the people that live there. And I would be confident you could probably go to any building that he owns and manages where you could go check and you would notice the difference between that and a building where they haven't used the people principle to manage the business. So please do give us a thumbs up. Thank you for watching today. If you've got topics that you would like or you'd like to be a guest on our show, please contact me, David at First Fusion Capital Funding, I know that's a long one, .com, and I would be glad to consider you or someone you recommend as a guest. Hudson, thank you so much for your time today. You have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Same to you. Thank you.